Hi there, and welcome to Suitcase Coder, the podcast. My name is Laura, and I'm the host of this podcast where I track my journey from joining a coding bootcamp to becoming a freelance web developer. Now, you may be wondering, why Suitcase Coder? The reason behind that is that my goal in life has always been to travel the world, and I think I'll get there one day through the power of web development. So, if you're wanting a similar path or you're on it yourself, whether you're considering to join a bootcamp or you're wanting to become a freelancer, or like me, if you want to travel the world, then I hope you find this podcast helpful. So, for the next couple of weeks or maybe even months, I'm going to begin to sprinkle in some technical episodes here and there. And mind you, I'm saying technical within air quotes because for a lot of you devs that are a little bit more advanced, these are not going to be technical enough. But that's exactly the idea. None of us were born learning to code, and we were all there at the beginning when you really didn't know what was going on. So these episodes are intended to cover the very surface level explanations of some of the topics that you may encounter as you're learning to code, but also that may come up in various coding bootcamps. I have only attended one coding bootcamp, so a lot of my resources will be pulled from that experience, but I still hope you find this helpful. So without further ado, let's get started on today's episode, which will be covering the basics of HTML. So if you're anything like me, the first thing you did is you go to Google and you ask, what is HTML? And Google probably spit out some kind of answer like, oh, it's a hypertext markup language that's used in over 90% of websites. All right, cool, but that doesn't give you nearly enough information to be able to grasp or understand what exactly HTML is. The way that I like to best explain HTML is that it's like a skeleton that makes up your website. And all it does is a way for you to communicate to the browser and say, hey, browser, these are the things that I want on my website, and this is the structure that I want it to take up. That's it. As you might know, HTML is made up of elements. These elements is just a way for that HTML structure to be broken down into sections on a website. And all it does, all HTML is that skeleton for your browser to be like, oh, this person wants a paragraph here on their website. Cool, let me put on a paragraph. And then below it, they want an image. Cool, I'm going to display whatever they put within this image tag as an image on their website. So as far as the next thing goes, I took to Slack, Reddit, Twitter, and I asked a bunch of people what are some common HTML questions that they had when they were starting off. And here were some of the common things that come up that people struggle with when they are getting started. So don't feel bad if this is something that you are struggling with. It's very common and it can be very confusing. So I know if you do go to an advanced developer, a lot of times I'll be like, oh, that's so easy. Like, why don't you know this kind of vibe? But don't fret it, you're going to catch on to it pretty quickly. So to dive deeper into HTML, HTML is broken down into elements, and all elements are opening and closing tags. And these tags specify what kind of content is going inside of them. For example, a paragraph tag. You have an opening paragraph and a closing paragraph tag, and everything in between there is going to be the paragraph, and you want it to be displayed as a paragraph. And your browser is going to understand that because you have an opening and a closing tag. So knowing that, a lot of the problems that people have when their HTML isn't working is that they'll mess up little things like spacing or forgetting to close a tag or forgetting to close out quotation marks. Make sure that you write out your structure exactly as it should be. So let me give you an example. Let's say I'm learning French and I go to a French speaker and I mess up on the verb and mispronounce a word here and there. They're still going to understand the gist of what I'm trying to say, and they're going to work with me and try to figure out the rest of the conversation. Computers are not like that. Computers are extremely literal, and if you don't give it exactly what they want, they're not going to understand. They're going to be like, oh, I'm confused, I don't know what you want, and they're just going to stop. So if your HTML isn't working, check little things like that. Check your spacing. Make sure that it's exactly as it should be. And I can almost assure you that a lot of your HTML problems will be fixed in taking account these tiny details. Okay, so on to the next thing. Within your opening tag, you can have a thing called attributes. And all attributes are key value pairs. So like, let's say height equals 200 pixels, or width equals 100 pixels, or href, so link, href equals this URL. It's just a way to give that specific element a little bit more information on that element. And two of the most common ones that you will see and will likely use and need in the future is class and ID. And all that class and ID are attributes that allow you to select this specific element when you're wanting to use it for something else in the future. So let's say you have a website with 5 paragraphs and you want 2 of those paragraphs to be blue. Well, how are you going to specify that you want those 2 paragraphs only to have a blue background and not all of the paragraphs? Well, you're going to give 2 of those paragraphs a class of blue. So you're going to say class equals open quote, blue, close quote. And that's going to go within your opening tag of your paragraph. So that when you go to style it, you know you're going to catch onto those 2 paragraphs and say, okay, I only want these 2 to be blue. So now the difference between class and ID is kind of simple. So class can be used several times, like we said with the blue paragraphs. You can have 3 blue paragraphs or you can have as many elements with the class of blue, whereas ID is a unique identifier to that specific element. So let's say you want one of those 5 paragraphs to have a red background, then you would give only one of those paragraphs an ID of red, and no other paragraph on your website can have an ID of red because it's already taken. And that's really it, and that's kind of hard to explain when we're not talking about CSS or jQuery or JavaScript or any of the more advanced things. But basically think of class and ID as a way to identify and specify which element you're wanting to do something with. So I'm hoping that makes a little bit more sense. Another big thing is accessibility, which plays into the semantics of HTML. So let me back up. What is accessibility? Accessibility is a way for you to make your website more accessible to more people around the world. So an example would be if somebody is needing a website read out to them by the computer is going to read top to bottom, left to right, just as it is, right? There are things that you can add or do within your HTML that make your website more accessible. And that makes it easier for your computer to read your website. But more importantly, it makes your website easier to understand for different users. So let's say a user is having a website read out to them. So you want to make sure that, for example, the title of your website is within an H1 tag so that the user knows, okay, this is the point, this is the title of the website, this is what this entire page is about. And then you want to specify subheadings and paragraphs and images. And that way that gives the users a little bit more of an understanding of like what's going on and what the structure of your website is, even if they can't see your website. So accessibility is pretty important, and make sure to take that into account. So if you can, try to make that a habit from now, because a lot of times I make this mistake is I'll create something and then say I'll go back and make it accessible later, and then I forget to do it. So if you can just implement it now, that's probably your best bet. If you have any more questions regarding HTML, this week I will be answering as much as I can on my Instagram or Twitter, and you can find me on Instagram at suitcasecoder or on Twitter at codersuitcase. I kind of messed up when I logged into Twitter there. But anyway, before we go, I want to leave you with an action item. And for this week's action item, it will very likely double up as a helpful tip as you're learning to code. I want you to head to your favorite websites and open up your browser's DevTools. As you open up these DevTools, a side-by-side will open up within that same browser and let you take a deeper look into the HTML of your favorite website. So I just want you to open it up, look around, and you can hover over certain elements on the HTML page and it will highlight those elements on the website. So that just kind of gives you a visual and a better understanding of how HTML is being used on bigger websites that you are very familiar with. So go ahead and do that and let me know what you think of that. And as far as the coding challenge goes, I want you to open up the text editor in your local computer, which I think nowadays the majority of computers have. So open up the text editor on your computer, create an HTML page, and there's plenty of resources to do this online. You can go to W3 Schools online, you can go to Free Code Camp, you can go to Codecademy, you can Google it. So I'm gonna leave that to you, but go ahead and create an HTML page. And then once you're done, once you have a couple paragraphs on there, maybe an image of your dog, I want you to head to your browser again and open up that file from your browser by going File, Open, and then select the file that you just created and opening it on the browser and see if you can create your very first HTML page and see it in the browser. I know that was a big light bulb moment for me, so I hope it's helpful to you. Again, I'm a bit behind still on the weekly challenges on my website, but feel free to head there. I plan to have all the solutions up there hopefully very soon, and you can catch me there at www.suitcasecoder.com. If you'd like to watch the recordings of these episodes, head over to my YouTube channel at Suitcase Coder, as I post a recording of this episode on Wednesdays. So luck this week, have fun, enjoy it, and feel free to reach out on any of my socials, which I will leave in the show notes. Thanks for listening. Have a great week. Bye.